Exercise currently taking place is meant to safeguard Nigeria's economy and security. Still in his New Year message, President Buhari said Nigeria realizes that it is the helper and shock absorber of the sub-region, but cannot allow this country's well-planned economic regeneration plans to be sabotaged. Meanwhile, all babies, they say, look alike on delivery, but the first baby to break the dawn of this new decade found his way to the family of a police officer in Gwagwa, a suburb in Abuja. Fate beamed its smile on this family, attracting the presence of dignitaries across Abuja, including the First Lady, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari.
Is a significant and symbolic event because it shows the value and importance the First Lady of Nigeria places on the welfare of women and children in the country. The importance of healthcare delivery cannot be overemphasized, especially as it concerns infant and maternal health.
These children need love. These children need to be shown good examples. These children need to be raised appropriately.
Meanwhile, the First Lady of Nigeria, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, has congratulated Nigerian children for witnessing another new year in their life history, of her motherly support and encouragement at all times towards becoming great future leaders of the country. The First Lady stated this in a New Year message during the 2019-2020 Christmas and New Year Children's Party organized in their honor at the banquet hall of the Presidential Villa, Abuja.
I'm very happy I came to Villa, and I want to thank our Excellency, the First Lady, Miss Aisha Muhammadu Buhari. I want to thank her for allowing us to express joy.
I want to thank you, Lord, for allowing me to live up to this new year.
I want to use this opportunity to thank Miss Aisha Muhammadu Buhari for organizing this memorable and historical event.
The lives of 13 traffic controller officers in Abuja have been transformed remarkably after decades of selfless service. Fortune unexpectedly smiled on them after years of hard work to humanity.
I don't expect seeing something like this, but it just came. So in fact, I'm very, very happy.
And I also want my fellow Nigerian police, those on the road, to know that whatever we are doing on the road that people are watching, we should put more effort.
If you want Nigerian to have more good schools, start from your community, let's contribute. If you want Nigeria to have good and safe environment, encourage the security personnel around you, whether you're getting man, anywhere. Let's think of how you should build a Nigeria of our dream.
And elsewhere, an opposition party candidate and former Prime Minister Umaru Sissoco Embalo has been declared winner of the 2019 runoff presidential elections in Guinea-Bissau.
Domingos Simões Pereira got 254,468 votes, equivalent of 46.4%, while Umaru Sissoco Embalo polled 293,536 votes, representing 53.5%. The CNE hereby declares the candidate Umaru Sissoco Embalo as the winner of the election.
And that is the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Jumai and Claire after this break. Good morning.
20 years of travel and counting. 20 years of promoting tourism in Africa and diaspora. Over 3 million kilometers traveled. Over 30 African countries visited. Explored the diaspora in 4 continents. Connected over 100,000 happy tourists to Africa. Reached over 50 million homes. Igniting smiles across Africa and beyond. As Gogi Africa turns 20, we thank you and invite you to join us in the quest for 20 must-visit destinations in partnership with the largest TV network in Africa, the NTA, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Transportation, Lagos State Government, Canon, Delta Airlines, Royal Caribbean, Tour Brokers International. You too can still be a partner. Call the numbers on your screen or info@gogeafrica.tv. Goge Africa, celebrating 2 decades of heritage, travel and tourism.
Ha! Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down.
Do you have a job where you're going to?
No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Alinko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. You know, I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad, or even end up in prison.
My name is Giato Adeza Adams, the General Manager, Corporate and Strategic Communications, Nigerian Port Authority. As regards the land borders closure, available statistical data from APMT, which is one of our terminal operators that is involved in container handling terminal, has recorded an increase of 200 TEUs of cargoes into their terminal as a result of cargo diversion from the vessels originally meant for our neighboring countries. That shows you that the terminal operators is going to have an increase in revenue, which is accrued to the terminal, and at the same time, Nigerian Port Authority will equally benefit from the revenue increase. So that is the benefit we have derived from the border closure.
Thanks for rejoining us. There are business articles that stood out in 2019. Now, let's take a walk back into 2019 and relive some moments with Kolo Muhammad as our guide on business news.
Hello and welcome. Come along with me on a journey down the business path of 2019. Therein, we shall relive some moments, especially those that stood out in shaping our business sector in 2019. First, let's remind you of the absence of possibility of raising rates anytime soon. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria has either maintained or downward reviewed finance or business rates lately.
The committee noted the developments in the monetary aggregates and enjoined the bank to initiate moves towards improving lending to the private sector and urged other intermediary institutions in the financial sector to support these initiatives by improving their credit delivery to boost output growth.
The Corporate Affairs Commission has also worked to reduce charges of business registration and also decentralize the process to cut down time taken to finish registration. With rates maintained or reduced, it hands prospective global and domestic investors assurance of huge gains if they invest in the new Nigerian business environment.
Buying a lot of things online. We are getting our themes online for developing websites. We are doing our social media adverts online. Everything that we basically do is online as a digital marketer. So the reduced price from the CBN government is actually going to help us a whole lot. And I like the fact that the government is actually helping not only the entire country, but also small business owners as well, especially people who are running digital marketing agencies.
And Nigeria plans to upward review its crude oil reserves from 37 billion barrels to about 40 billion barrels when its new frontier basins come on stream. Huge sums and 21st century technology is being employed in the basins on the trail of commercial quantity hydrocarbon.
Any serious government actually has to go into this kind of things, the issue of going into other basins that are not Niger Delta to find out the possibility of getting oil. Any government that is interested in the unity of the country.
The New Year's holiday officially ends today. The equities market will open afterwards. NTA Business News will bring you closing figures subsequently. My name is Kolo Muhammad. This is wishing Nigeria a peaceful, progressive and prosperous 2020.
All right, many thanks to you, Kolo Mohammed, for that beautiful package of the business news. And as you can see, I'm holding up one of the newspapers. That's to show you that newspaper review is coming up next in a moment.
And Bayo Atiobi, our GMN newspaper reviewer, is here. Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning.
Good to see you as always.
Yes,
Good morning,
yes, thank you.
I
Good morning,
thought the weather was extremely windy and cold this morning, but not too cold for you to get out of bed.
Well, you have to get out of bed. But you see, Hamatan is here, and having relaxed for Christmas and New Year, people normally want to relax at home, but the weather has to take its toll.
Well, I'm not really feeling the cold coming from Maiduguri, you know.
Yes.
It's extreme.
Yes.
Maiduguri, it's just like AC cold now, yes.
Kano,
Adamawa, yeah.
And strangely too, Zaria and Jos can also be very cold.
The first time I went to Maiduguri, I know that you were in Maiduguri then. That was the first time I had my experience of sandstorm.
Yeah, sandstorm.
It was extremely cold. But it was a nice experience, Bayo.
Yes, it can be very frightening.
Right. Let's begin with this.
Yes, so we begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Just below the masthead, criminals bent on unleashing terror. That's coming from Northern Governors. You find that story on page 3. Nigerians want further cut as new bank charges commences. That story is on page 13. I have no rift with Governor Ganduje. That's coming from Abdul Miminu Jibrin. And the headlines there, we see them. Passengers groan under transportation problems in FCT. 102 high-capacity buses grounded. You can see the picture story there. People scrambling to get, into a taxi cab. And it was really, really, an empty street during the festive season.
Yes,
and getting a taxi
I'm
was a
wondering
problem.
what area of the FCT, this.
Yes, they said, okay, commuters struggled to board unpainted cabs and an Abuja transport commercial bus at the city center. That's the city center, And at the bottom plate of the Daily Trust newspaper, 79-year-old man, 3 others in police net over rape cases. That's a very, 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 very sad situation. You find that story on page 4. Borno governor begins 2020 with launch of 5 projects. You find that story on page 6. 1 million rice farmers ready for dry season farming. Dry season production. That story is on page 27. That's a very good move in the agricultural sector. What do you think, Claire?
Always a good move in the agricultural sector. But Bayo, I think it's the right time we brought you in here.
Yes.
Take a look at some of the stories that she's just read from the Daily Trust.
Well, the one that catches my attention is that of transportation.
Yes.
In the Federal Capital Territory, there's supposed to be these long buses that help commuting persons from the suburbs into the city. In the past, there used to be mini buses, but the mini buses have been confined to the satellite area. Of recent, as part of the policy of FCDA to sanitize the transport system, some of the tricycles were limited. Motorcycles have been consigned to the satellite towns. The challenge, therefore, now is that there are very few functioning government long buses to commute passengers, and therefore people now have to resort to private taxis, unpainted taxis. If you recall, just about a month ago, the FCDA task force was going down the street arresting unpainted taxis. The danger now is that there are few vehicles, commercial vehicles, available for people to commute.
Yes.
And you have a lot of people committing up and down every now and then. If you are going
102 high-capacity buses.
Yes, along Kubwa Road, you see them all parked there. All stuck, not moving. So
some people have argued that sometimes we tend to put the cart before the horse. That we could have considered the availability and capacity of the FCT to provide some of these commercial buses before effecting the relocation of the tricycles that we normally call keke napep and all that. Good policy, good move, at least to sanitize the city center. But now the repercussion is what we're seeing.
Yes, and the minister was saying that it was a very hard decision to come by because, he knows a lot of people are going to suffer, but it needs to be done so that they can bring sanity to our roads here in Abuja.
Even using motorcycles for transportation became a matter of necessity.
Yes.
If there were adequate buses, adequate taxis, nobody would risk his life boarding a motorcycle for a means of transportation. It became a matter of necessity because of the inadequacies. If therefore you are going to make rules to restrict this mode of transportation, you must make sure that the alternative, the better alternatives are available.
Yes,
Exactly.
it's already in place.
Another issue, Jume and Bayo, is the fact that over 100 of those buses are grounded at the same time. Now that speaks a lot to our, again,
maintenance culture.
You know, and whose responsibility is it anyway to see to attend to the buses?
There is the private transportation system under the supervision of the Federal Capital Territory Administration. And the challenges has been that the buses have been old, they've been there. The FCDA was managing it to make sure that it is not exploitative. And the private operators too were trying to make sure that it was economical and profitable. So in between the two, you have the buses aging and lack of maintenance, consigning many of them to their garage.
Even you hardly see the yellow and is it yellow and blue taxis?
No, you don't see them.
You hardly see them. There are a few in number.
Yes.
You know, across the city center. All right, Bayo, any other story you want to take before I take?
Usually when there is a new year, there is the first baby of the year. The First Lady, Aisha Buhari, was at the Gwagwa Primary Health Center, where the first baby of the year, baby Muhammad Sani, was delivered on the dot at 12 midnight. The First Lady was represented by the spouse of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Salamatu Gbajabi Amila. She welcomed baby Muhammad and others born on New Year Day with gifts. And the baby Muhammad is one of 26,039 that UNICEF said will be born yesterday.
Yes. You know, I was just sharing with Jinjume. I was wondering why I didn't have any of my babies on the first of any of the years. You know, and I think I'm going to plan that.
Yeah, it's not too late to plan.
It's not too late
to what?
Well, talking about new babies.
Yes.
New babies enter, and life also has its doors for exit. The oldest soldier faded away yesterday. Nigeria's oldest surviving soldier faded away. He is Pa Adamu Aduku.
Surviving soldier from
the World War.
World War.
Wow.
Okay.
He was aged 101 years.
That's a celebration of life.
Yes. In fact, he was celebrated in 2018 when the Vice President gave him some award. Pa Aduku, he's now a great-great-grandfather, was born in 1918 at Abejukolo in Maha local government area of Kogi State. He joined the army under the joint Nigerian contingent of the British colonial army and fought in the World War in Burma and Egypt. Old soldiers, they say, never die. They only fade away. I hope we has faded away to rest in peace.
Amen. You know, sometimes it's so touchy and also heartwarming to know that we still find people who have longevity, you know, despite the challenges, you know, of effective healthcare provision and all that. And we really need to seek out some of these, you know, living legends, you know, to take a cue from them, inquire from them what is the secret behind their longevity. But
what we actually have lost is his reminiscence of the era of the World War and his experiences.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. All right, Bayo, let me quickly take a look at the Daily Sun. Daily Sun, of course, is, you know, again, reflecting on the, you know, New Year agenda for Mr. President. The Daily Sun captures its lead story as Ohaneze Afenifere Middle Belt Forum, all set agenda for Buhari. And there's a writer too, Balarabe Musa Kokore, others as well. That's the lead story from the Daily Sun. Of course, it has a very busy page. And just below that lead story, you find again the babies of the year. This one is the first to be delivered at the Olabisi Onabanjo University Teaching Hospital. That's in Shagamu, Ogun State. And you see the First Lady or wife of the Governor of the state, Bamidele Abiodun, of course, with two of the babies delivered there. We also find others in Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Ibadan, or you're also on that front page. Now, just below that, our story on eviction of High Commission in Ghana. Federal government is giving its own side of the story. And quite a number of other stories on the front page. Minimum wage, NLC direct state councils to stand by over deadline. You can find the stories right there. And then Abia 2030, Isukwato leaders insist on governorship. It's also trending there. But just a little on the side of the nameplate, you find we are shopping for South President. Arewa youths, of course, and northern governors committed to united Nigeria. That's coming from the, of course, northern governors, chairman and governor of Plateau State, Simon Ladong, there. All right, Bayo.
Yes, talking about agenda, the president has indicated that 2020, the beginning of this decade, and particularly for this year, 47 critical projects will be completed. And that has a dual purpose. First of all, it puts everybody in the nation on attention about the programs that the government intend to complete in this year. And we are going to note them and take them on it. The second aspect of it is that, if you recall, before the ministers were sworn in, they were also given their targets and the agenda. And the secretary to the government of the federation is the one to monitor and ensure that they achieve them. And therefore, for these 47 projects and all items that have been so identified, it becomes a target that has been set for those who are responsible for those ministries and for those projects to ensure that they meet the expectation.
And they gave the scorecard of their 100 days in office. Actually. Yes.
The other area also was where President Muhammadu Buhari has reiterated that he's withdrawing from political contest in 2023. As obvious and as constitutional as that is, I think it became necessary to reiterate that, because in the immediate past there have been subtle attempts to amend the constitution to make attempts at third term. Those have been denied in the public and had actually continued subtly behind the scene. And eventually, thanks to Providence, it was killed at the National Assembly. And this time, this is a confirmation that there will be no such subtle subversion of the Constitution. And therefore, when you read the story, Claire read the story about preparations, about where the next candidate should come for 2023, already politicians, they say, are always preparing for the next election.
Exactly.
All right, let's quickly take a look at the editorial. And that's, of course, given bearing other stories of interest. The editorial is on Nigeria's $15 billion annual loss to tax evasion. And it's the Blueprint editorial. Bio. This, of course, the revelation was, made by the former chairman of the FIRS, to the fact that Nigeria, loses about $15 billion, dollars annually to tax evasion. And this paper has described it as, mind-boggling and deplorable. And of course, it's also, Fowler was said to have, announced that Nigeria would begin to implement the first automatic exchange of information standard this year. And the regime was part of Nigeria's commitment to improve transparency in tax administration, increase tax revenue collection, enhance effectiveness and efficiency service delivery. So the crux of this editorial is that it is urging the FIRS to evoke sections 49 subsection 2 AD of its Establishment Act, which authorizes the agency to proceed against and punish every officer, manager, director, secretary, or any person concerned with the management of any defaulting company in like manner as, if she or he had committed the offense.
Okay. Well, before I go to can I quickly refer to the story you provided clarification for yesterday, and that is the echo currency.
Okay.
Now, experts have advised Nigeria that it is not yet time for Nigeria to join that currency. Presently, like you pointed out yesterday, 8 French colonies in the West Africa have adopted ECHO as their currency. This is apparently exchanging what was safer before for ECHO. And the experts are saying that it is not yet time for Nigeria to join. In fact, they pointed out that the main criteria for arriving at a common currency have actually not been met by many of the states.
Yes,
and
that's the convergence.
Yes.
There are 2 levels of convergence.
Yes.
The first, the primary, and the secondary. Yes.
And therefore, they advise that Nigeria should not risk that. As at now, they are saying that the naira should continue to be our medium currency of exchange, and we should not be tempted to join the France subtle labeled echo that has been adopted.
No, but we're not going to join the France. Yes. You know,
it's an ECOWAS
yes,
currency.
the Anglophone, whatever.
Yes, of ECOWAS.
Yes, I mean there were plans to harmonize both the CFA France and the new ECOWAS ECHO. You know, into a common currency. Yeah. But, you know, the Francophone countries have gone ahead, you know, to adopt the ECHO as their own, the name of their currency.
They know Nigeria will give a soft landing for whatever will arise from that. We don't want to have, just the way the Brexit is going. I don't think Nigeria will need to really understand the terms first before joining, so that we don't have a Naira, is it Naira exit, or what we'll call our own?
No, I think the plan was to harmonize both, you know, the Anglophone and the CFA, to have a common currency for West Africa.
Yes.
For West Africa.
You see, under the ECOWAS, there were plans since 2004 to have a common currency for the community. But there were criteria that were to be met by member states. And one of them is at least inflation rate less than 5%, budget deficit not less than 3%, foreign reserve to cover 3 months of worth of exports, and others. Many of these have not been met. But 8 of the French colonies who belong to the CFA have now adopted what they call their own ECHO. And the experts are saying this is a transmutation of CFA that is backed by France as a medium of exchange under the guise of ECHO, and they are cautioning Nigeria to be very careful not to double in this.
All right, Bayo, it's a developing story that experts will really need to look at the implication of that, you understand, on the common ECOWAS currency, which is also known as ECHO, or which has been adopted. ECHO is the name that has been adopted for it. So, like you said, it's a developing story that we have to.
On taxation, and the essence of taxation is that if budget deficit is to be eliminated, there must be tremendous revenue generated by government to meet its budget commitments. And where are those going to come from? One of the key areas is also tax. And therefore, where there are challenges of people avoiding and not paying tax, it becomes a matter of serious challenge for the Federal Inland Revenue Service. You recall that during the last tenure of the former chairman, there was a moment of respite for people to come to voluntary, it was called V8, you remember, voluntary asset declaration. And that helped tremendously. And this determination, this time around, going to about a quantum of about $15 billion is a quantum of revenue that Nigeria cannot afford to let go. And therefore,
Bayo, we just have to stop here at this. Yes, I didn't raise my yellow card, but I have to raise it here. Thank you, Bayo. We'll see you again tomorrow, God willing.
All right,
this is Good Morning Nigeria. Let's take a break now. When we come back, we'll, of course, set the tone for our conversation.
They swore an oath to serve our fatherland and defend the people. They traded their freedom, comfortable homes, and mortgaged their lives on the battleground for our unity and peaceful living. These are the great, fearless, loyal, and committed Nigerian armed forces who risked their lives courageously to safeguard our borders. But in the line of duty, many never returned. Nigerians, arise, let's celebrate our fallen heroes. Put on the remembrance emblem with pride to support the incapacitated and families of our fallen heroes.
It is indeed befitting to honor the memory of the gallant hearts of young men who paid the supreme sacrifice to keep the country united.
President Muhammadu Buhari enjoins all ministries, parastatals, religious and corporate bodies to donate generously to the Emblem Appeal Launch. Send your donations to these accounts. Account name, Emblem Appeal Launch. Account number 393-200-7526. EcoBank Nigeria PLC.
Nigeria is our country, and it's the only country we have. Irrespective of religion, tribe, the heroes of our past did their best to take Nigeria to where it is today. It would be unfortunate, I repeat, unfortunate, absolutely, if we don't keep Nigeria intact. We must put our differences behind. We must let everybody know that human beings cannot live together without some differences. But at the end of the day, our country is Nigerian. It must always come first.
Get ready for the Unity Challenge reality TV show. Coming soon.
We have come to the end of another successful year, and we wish to appreciate all those that mean so much to us: our sponsors, our clients, government at all levels, corporate bodies, advertisers, religious bodies, civil society groups, political parties, and above all, you, our esteemed viewer. Together, we made 2019 great. Together, we shall make 2020 even greater. That is why we say, thank you. This is wishing you Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
You're welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, and we shall be discussing on justice sector in 2020. And to set the tone for our conversation, let's take this background report by Dele Atumbi.
The judiciary, no doubt, has been described as the last hope of the common man, where justice is expected to be dispensed in accordance with the law as it is. As a way of maintaining law and order, judicial pronouncements in accordance with the rule of law must be obeyed. During the course of the year, a sitting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onoge, was arraigned before the Code of Conduct Tribunal over non-declaration of assets. The presiding officer at the tribunal, Danladi Urmal, found Justice Onoge guilty of the 2-count charge. The National Judicial Council, exercising its power, recommended the immediate retirement of the indicted Chief Justice of Nigeria and the appointment of Justice Ibrahim Tanko Muhammad as his replacement. The justice sector witnessed the continuation of the trial of alleged corruption cases, with 23 former governors standing trial in various courts across the country, with one of them, Oji Uzo Kalu, a sitting senator, sentenced to 12 years in correctional service facility. This brings to 3 the number of former governors serving various jail terms in the country. Jolly Nyame of Taraba State and Joshua Dariye were convicted in 2018.
A lot of improvements are being churned out so that litigations, particularly with respect to criminal litigations, are speedily disposed of.
In terms of the compliance with what we thought was coming to revolutionize the judiciary, which is the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, I don't think the judiciary has performed very well, because cases are still largely delayed for a very long time in courts, which is the bane of our justice system.
2019 was an election year, with its attendant litigations over pre-election and election matters. Aside from pre-election matters, the 78 tribunals empaneled attended to 786 petitions that arose from the conduct of governorship, National Assembly and State Houses of Assembly elections. In its appellate jurisdiction, the Court of Appeal adjudicated on 805 appeals arising from the verdict of the tribunals in its 16 divisions across the country.
Judiciary is one of the most overworked in the world. If you go to the advanced democracies, or even comparable countries like Ghana and what have you, you would not see the number of such cases.
In 2019, it's one of the most difficult times for the Nigerian judiciary.
During the year under review, the National Judicial Council dismissed some judges, instituted 8 panels to look into allegations against 8 judges, recommended the appointments of new heads of courts, including that of the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, Justice John Toho. As a way of demonstrating its respect for the rule of law, the federal government also directed the DSS to release the former National Security Advisor, Sambo Dasuki, and the convener of Revolution Now, Omoyele Sowore, following various court orders.
All right, many thanks to you, Dele Atumbi, for the background. Now we have the full complement of the judiciary here with us. But let me quickly introduce those in our studio to discuss justice sector in 2020. 20 and of course in retrospect to 2019. We have the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice here with us, Abaka Malame, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. Happy New Year as well.
Also with us here in the studio is the President's Center for Social Legal Studies, Professor Yemi Akinshaye George. He's also a Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Good to have you with us and good morning, Nigeria, sir.
Thank you. Good morning.
Also joining us from our Jos studio is Garba Usman Tetengi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He was the former Vice President Nigeria Bar Association between 2000 and 2002. He was also a former member of the National Judicial Council, NJC, between 2014 and 2018. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Happy New Year.
Good morning and Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you.
Right, as is customary here on Good Morning Nigeria, when we have a minister, what we do is, of course, to have the minister give us an overview of his or her area of jurisdiction before we now make the conversation inclusive. So we will begin with the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation. Honorable Minister, in evaluating the performance of the judiciary, of course, in 2019, of the Justice Ministry, rather, in 2019, would you say it's still the, final habitat? Or how did it fare?
Well, in terms of performance, in terms of provision of the services and delivery of the mandate of the ministry, I think the major issues for consideration in arriving at a decision as to whether it fares well or not, I think has to be rooted in multiple dimensions. If you are talking of the support relating to legislative process, you have to look at it within the mirror and the context of what are the legislations, for example, that are put in place and their effect in the overall development of the nation. If you are talking of democracy, for example, what are the support services provided by the Ministry of Justice in deepening our democracy? Looking through the legislations that were passed and indeed assented by the President at the instance of the opinion proffered by the Office of the Attorney General of Federal Ministry of Justice, we have succeeded, I believe, in deepening our democracy through the constitutional amendments, port alteration, for example. Not Too Young Throne Bill, for example, is a bill, in essence, that has deepened the accommodation of merit as against various placed in effective participation of younger ones in the electoral process. If you are talking of the support, institutional support, for example, the amendment to the Constitution that gave rise to the legislative and judicial autonomy at the state level, for example, had equally succeeded in deepening the democratic process. The same thing with an amendment to the Constitution by way of force alteration that now gave rise to efficient and speedy determination of election petition cases. The Court of Appeal, for example, has within a limited time span arising from the amendment to the Constitution succeeded in disposing over 800 cases in record time, arising from the legislative support that has been brought in place by the constitutional amendment, Port Alteration Bill. Now, if you are looking at it as well from the perspectives of the fight against corruption, I think the ministry has fared well, taking into consideration that for the first time in the history of this country, with the active support of the ministry, bringing about the desired policies, supporting the legislative process, we have succeeded as a government in enhancing the recovery of illicit funds by over 1,360%. That is by no means a great feat in terms of the successes recorded by the administration. If you are equally talking of the economic advancement of the nation, Ministry of Justice has indeed effectively supported the legislations that turn things around for the better in terms of revenue generation of the government. Take a look, for example, of the finance bill that has a component of about 7 bills: Customs and Excise, Companies and Allied Matters Act, Value Added Tax, among others, which in their effect and implication had a potency of indeed enhancing the revenue generation of the government by a substantial and sizable limit or enhancement thereof. So if you talk of the security situation, for example, the Ministry of Justice had equally succeeded greatly in terms of providing the desired support by way of bringing about the desired security in the land. We were labeling witnesses to what resources are being committed in the northeast in fighting Boko Haram insurgency. So through the act of perhaps initiating judicial processes relating to acts that are seen to be perhaps inimical, that if not nipped in the bud, could escalate to insecurity situation, the Federal Ministry of Justice has succeeded in presenting a case before judicial process for the court now to look into them, determine whether indeed arising from the factual situations presented are cases that required to be determined by way of proscriptions of certain organizations and associations that are perhaps maybe by the thoughts of the government that could escalate the security situation. And by that singular act, for example, of proscribing some of these organizations, you have succeeded in supporting the security situation of the nation, saving the nation the cost associated with the insecurity that may arise eventually, if not nip in the bud. So, by and large, if you are talking of a democracy, Federal Ministry of Justice has succeeded in coming up with policies that deepen our democracy. If you are talking of insecurity, the Federal Ministry of Justice is there to provide the required support to deepen to support our security architecture. If you are talking of economy, the Federal Ministry of Justice has indeed succeeded in supporting the desired legislative and policy decisions that could enhance the economic fortunes of the country. And then if you are talking as well of fight against corruption, the Federal Ministry of Justice is there handy in providing the desired policies that will ensure at the end of the day that the fight against corruption by the government has indeed not only succeeded, but indeed translated into turning around of the fortune of the government. So I think by and large, Federal Ministry of Justice as an institution has succeeded in all respect, in all ramifications, and had indeed covered grounds by way of providing the desired policy support platforms to enable the enhancement and development of the nation.
Based on what you've been saying, in any democratic society like ours, there has been calls for the increase of judges for speedy dispensation of justice, and the Supreme Court, called to reduce the burden on judicial officers. So some stakeholders are saying it has not been captured in the 2020 budget. Can you shed more light on that, please?
Well, if you are talking of speedy, the workload associated with the judicial system, I think it's something that you have to look at from multiple dimensions in terms of providing the desired solution. When you talk of perhaps additional courts, that translates to creation of additional infrastructure, making provisions for additional funding and finances in a situation whereby the government is battling with paucity of funds and limitations and resources. So I think in taking a decision as to whether what you require are additional justices, additional courtrooms, additional funding in the running of the judicial system, you have to factor the cost effectiveness of what initiatives you are putting across for consideration. Okay. It is simply not about, not through the process of additional courts. It's not the exclusive way through which you can address the workload associated with the judicial system. Take, for example, the issue of jurisdiction. As it is today, a simple case of 1 million naira land in contention could end up having its way up to the Supreme Court. The same thing with a commercial dispute of perhaps maybe 1 million naira. Perhaps a lot of time, resources, and energy is wasted up to the Supreme Court. So perhaps looking at the Constitution, looking at the jurisdiction of these courts, you can still factor the cost-effective elements into that decision by way of limiting the the nature of the subject matter that gets to the Supreme Court, both in terms of volume and in terms of nature. Perhaps maybe a dispute, a commercial dispute not exceeding 1 billion could terminate at the Court of Appeal at the final determination point, thereby saving the Supreme Court the trouble of looking into 1 billion naira commercial dispute. If you do that, for example, you now support it is cost effective because no cost is factored into that process, for example, and then you do not require additional justices, for example, immediately. So it is there are low-hanging fruits, if I may put it that way, that we can succeed in achieving by way of considering other options other than the options relating to having additional justices, options other than having additional courtrooms, for example, perhaps maybe looking at what we can do in terms of amending our laws, in terms of restricting the jurisdiction that what case gets to the Supreme Court and in which way and manner, among others, for example.
Are there specific portions of the law that we could amend, with regards to this?
Well, for example, when we felt there was need for accommodating the younger ones in terms of participating in the political landscape, we look into the Constitution, look at those constitutional provisions that impede the participation by way of age limit and make necessary amendment to it. Now, the jurisdiction of the Federal High Court, for example, the jurisdiction of all court of records, inclusive of the Supreme Court, is statutorily regulated. So it is a matter of looking into those statutory provisions, either constitutional or otherwise, looking into the jurisdiction and see what we can do by way of making necessary alterations to the Constitution or necessary amendments to the law to accommodate those possibilities.
All right. If you've talked about in the different areas in which the Ministry of Justice has helped to provided support and, of course, deepened democracy. As of course, your office is, the #1 law officer for the country. In what ways have your office also helped to promote, the fundamental human rights that is enshrined in the Constitution?
Well, the Office of the Attorney General has succeeded, had indeed supported the entrenchment of the human rights generally. For example, if you look at, take it, for example, from the perspectives of institutional context, where a right of an individual is perhaps breached by an institution of government. I think this government, I am certain, no, I'm not thinking, I'm certain this government is the first government ever in the history of Nigeria that submitted to a decision of the Human Rights Commission as it relates to Article 6, if you can rightly remember. Yeah. There was an allegation that those people were indeed unjustifiably killed by institutions of government. And the Human Rights Commission handed down a decision that an amount, I think within the region of around 130 million be paid to the families of the people that were allegedly killed by an institution of government. And that decision by the Human Rights Commission was respected by the government. That was the first decision ever handed down by the Human Rights Commission, which was respected by the government ever since the establishment of the commission. That in its own right establishes what? A respect for human rights by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. That is looking at it from the perspectives of giving effect to a decision by a commission that has never ever enjoyed the privilege of having its decision respected by the powers that be. Now, if you are looking at it from perspectives relating to compliance with the court orders as well, this is a government that believes in the supremacy, that believes in the independence of the judiciary, and indeed submitted itself to the decision of the judiciary, perhaps within the context of the rule of law. How do I mean? A decision that in all respect passed by a judicial system is we either comply wholeheartedly or go back to the rule of law by way of establishing rights that are accorded to us as a government. How do I mean? When a decision is passed, a judgment is delivered by the court, or an order or judgment is made, you have an option. 1, absolute and unconditional compliance. 2, challenge to the order by way of either an appeal against the order, by way of having the order reviewed, or by way of perhaps an appealing and applying for stay of execution of the order. So in respect of those orders that we feel as a government that we are not comfortable with, we challenge. Go back to the court and have them challenge.
Are there specific cases that you want to point? Because government has come under, criticisms for, what the rights groups, consider selective, respect for some court judgments.
Perhaps maybe I have to clear the air for you to appreciate the way the rule of law operates within the context of the Nigerian situation and the Nigerian constitution. We have multiple and plethora of judicial decisions that establishes a fact that when you are challenging a court order through judicial process that handed the court order, the idea of disobedience or a challenge of disobedience to that court order does not arise. So the misapprehension that's set into the system, and that has been deliberately perhaps been put in the public space, is the fact that once there is a court order, you must unconditionally comply. You can only be adjudged being in disobedience of a court order when you do not take advantage of the constitutional powers, rights, and privileges accorded by you of appealing against them, against the orders, and perhaps seeking for stay of execution of the order. Or perhaps you do not take any steps seeking for variation of the court orders. When an order is made, and then as a government, individual, or a corporate body, you are dissatisfied with the order, you take steps to challenge it by way of an appeal and seeking for stay execution, by way of seeking for variation of the order, or by way of setting the order aside, until that matter is determined, until that your right of challenge is determined up to the Supreme Court level. The idea of you being charged with disobedience of the court order does not arise.
In the case of Dasuki and Shogore, were there variations in the court order? Did you seek variations?
There were applications for setting aside. There were appeals. There were applications for stay of execution all through. So until those matters reached the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court takes a final decision relating thereto, you are still operating within the ambit, within the context of the rule of law, because the rule of law in the context, in a situation whereby an order or judgment is being contested, is a submission to the court for the purpose of seeking one relief or the other as it relates to the order that has been granted. So I think it is important now to understand clearly how the rule of law operates within the context of the Nigerian situation, within the ambit of our constitutional law, within the ambit of our statutory provisions.
Okay. Talking about rule of law and ensuring that people get justice, the Criminal Act 2015 and the Correctional Services Act 2019 was signed into law by Mr. President last year. So what kind of synergy are you having with the head of the correctional agencies and all that to ensure that people get speedy dispensation of justice and don't stay on a waiting trial for ages before they now get it?
You see, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, for example, and the Correctional Service Act, among others, were innovations by this government to bring about the desired speed in the administration of justice, inclusive of Order 6, Executive Order number 6, that relates to the restriction of movement of people accused of, charged before the court of corruption cases. So within the context of the three, the Correctional Service Act, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, and Executive Order Act, the intention and desire was to bring about the enhanced speed in the determination of cases. Before coming into place of this administration in 2015, we had cases that were pending in court for 10 years. Criminal cases, high-profile criminal cases, for 10 years without moving an inch, other than perhaps maybe arraignment. The idea of determination by way of calling witnesses, taking witnesses, and have the matter adjudicated one way or the other was all through being truncated, strangulated, and indeed substantially placed on hold on account of technical, on account of perhaps technical objections that were allowed to set into the system. So the Administration of Criminal Justice, for the purpose of bringing about the desired speed, one, establishes day in, day out determination. Because for the administration of criminal justice was to raise one objection or the other and then allow the objection to run full cycle up to the Supreme Court while the matter at the trial level was being stayed without making any meaningful progress. That was eliminated by the administration of criminal justice that now establishes whatever objection you want to raise, you can raise it. But then the idea of stopping the proceedings does not arise.
So quickly, before we open the conversation space, in terms of value added to speedy delivery of justice, how would you evaluate that?
The administration of criminal justice, for example, has indeed added value, and that is what we are now seeing with the speedy determination of cases. I think of recent, we have 3 convictions of the former governors. Those cases were before the coming in place of this administration, pending for over 10 years without moving an inch. So the value added is now apparent, arising from the fact that cases are being determined speedily. In terms of Correctional Service Act, for example, it is an act that has a clear attribute of now ensuring at the end of the day that our correctional services formations across the country are not unduly decongested. We have been battling with a serious congestion in our correctional service formation over time, to such an extent that over 70% of the inmates were awaiting trial. So we now thought of the better way to handle the congestion problem associated with our correctional service formation across the country, and we now come up with Correctional Service Act by way of ensuring, for example, that one, the officers at the correctional service were accorded some discretion to refuse to accept an inmate in the absence of proper documentation.
Okay.
The discretion to ensure that if you have a formation capacity that is meant for 1,000 people, when 1,001 person is brought in, you have a discretion to refuse, and then a discretion among others to ask questions. So I think that is the value added, the chain that has been brought into those elements, for example.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you very much for the clarifications that you have made, especially with regards to the rule of law and adherence, by government. Let's now widen the scope of our conversation by bringing in the Professor Yemi Akinseye George, who is right here with us in the studio, President Center for Social Legal Studies. Let's have your take on, in terms of performance evaluation, both of the Ministry of Justice and the Judiciary. Would you say it's been business as usual?
I think there's no doubt that the justice sector, which comprises the executive and the judiciary. The executive arm of the justice sector is the Ministry, while the judicial arm consists of the judiciary. Then we also have the non-state actors, like our organization, the civil society organizations, the Nigerian Bar Association, and so on. So when you're looking at the performance of the justice sector, you have to look across board. Let's start with the Federal Ministry of Justice, which is the executive arm. I listened to the Honorable Attorney General reading off the achievements of the ministry, and one must say that a lot has been achieved. However, there's little information in the public about these achievements of the ministry. In fact, I'm aware of some of these things, but I'm aware that members of the public are not aware of some of these achievements. So perhaps there's need for the Federal Ministry of Justice to speak out more. The Honorable Attorney General spoke about support for the economy, legislative support for legislative instruments,
yes,
to
institutional
aid, exactly,
well.
So I think much has been said about the performance of the Federal Ministry of Justice, and I have no doubt that those are very worthy contributions. You know, some of the things that I like to underscore, you know, from what the Honorable Attorney General said, is the issue of autonomy, reform of the Constitution to enhance independence of the judiciary by giving teeth to the financial autonomy provisions of the Constitution. I think it's a bold step in the right direction. In fact, I was delighted when I discovered that this government had decided to address the issue of judiciary autonomy, financial autonomy for the judiciary, especially at the state level. Because the judiciary at the federal level is relatively autonomous financially at the federal level. But at the state level, judges have to go to chief governors to beg for money. And judges, governments can do and undo in terms of members of the Judicial Service Commission, in terms of providing support for the judiciary. That's why a lot of judges have no vehicles. Or those who have vehicles have poor vehicles, poor institutional support. So as far as a lot has been done at the federal level to breathe life into the provision of the Constitution that provides for financial autonomy for the judiciary. I also like the issue of accountability. Although many have been saying that government does not obey court orders and so on and so forth. But when recently there was this clamor with respect to human rights, the government showed that they are responsive to the public opinion. Even though there are court processes going on, they said, notwithstanding, we want to show that we are demonstrating respect for human rights. Those who are in detention were released, you know, in response to, that shows the government that listens. That shows accountability to the public. That shows we are no longer in the regime of impunity. We can do anything and get away with it. You know, so I think that also has to be under. Then again, I also like what the Honorable Attorney General said with respect to the anti-corruption agencies. I watched his recent media briefing where he highlighted the achievements of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the ICPC. I noticed that although the prosecutorial power is resided in the Office of the Attorney General, he has not been interfering, to the best of my knowledge, with the anti-corruption agencies. That's why even politically exposed persons are having their day in court. The cases are moving on. In the past, cases were stuck at the stage of arraignment. Many cases, but since 2015, since the passage of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, the government has embraced it and they are implementing it. And progress is made with respect.
So in terms of speed, we are seeing
we're making progress. Cases have been concluded.
Yes.
You know, like I was reading about one other former governor, Governor Jang. I understand prosecution has closed their case. He has brought a no-case submission, which has been thrown out. Now they are going to a full trial. You know, these things were not possible. Before 2015, no high-profile corruption cases were concluded.
What's your... The minister took time to, you know, clarify, you know, the stand of the executive arm in terms of rights, you know, rights, fundamental human rights as enshrined in the Constitution. What's your take on his clarification?
Human rights is also a broad spectrum. A lot of time when we talk about human rights, we're only looking at the rights of, you know, political rights, civil and political rights. But we have social and economic rights. You know, government is talking about fighting poverty, lifting 10 million people out of poverty. In other words, government is conscious of the fact that poverty makes it difficult for people to access their human rights, social and economic rights. So I think this is a matter of concern to the government. Social and economic rights. We also have civil and political rights, which is also a broad spectrum. You know, there have been challenges there. We cannot deny that. Yeah. There have been challenges, especially with respect to some high-profile defendants.
What are the challenges, briefly, before we bring in
the challenge was that government on the ground, I understand, for security reasons, and security is also very important. If we are not secure, we can't talk about human rights. Yeah. But there must be a balance between the rights of individuals to say anything they want to say.
And national security.
And our national security. There must be a balance. So what I see going on is a balancing act. Government was not comfortable with some attitudes of some individuals, and they asked them to account. Government must be effective. If government is not effective, we're all endangered. However, when there was a clamor with respect to certain things that were regarded as being excessive, maybe you have held certain individuals for so long without adequate justification. Then there was a response by the government. Okay, we agree with you, although we have our reasons to hold these individuals, but because you are saying we should release them, we are accountable, we're going to release them. It doesn't mean that all the issues have been resolved. But for me, there's a balancing, and that's what society is all about.
Okay,
so thank you. We'll now be bringing in Garba Usman Titengi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He is going to join us now on the program. You can see him on your screen. Sir, as member Corruption and Financial Crimes Commission Monitoring Committee set up by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, otherwise known as COMTICO, what are the legislative framework the present administration has put in place in fighting corruption? Let's have your comment on how the judiciary has fared in the year 2019 and then the legislative framework.
Well, good morning once again. I hope I'm a little bit audible now. First of all, let me say COMTRIMCO is headed by a retired Justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Suleiman Galadima, and it has about 23 other members, some of them chief judges of some of the states, some of them past presidents of the Nigerian Bar Association, and we have a representation as well of the civil society organizations, in fact, including the Ministry of Justice has a representation there. Well, as far as that committee is concerned, it was a committee that was set up by the National Judicial Council under the leadership of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. The committee is functioning and is live. And it has, to a very large extent, it was set up in order to complement the efforts of the executive in fighting corruption. In fighting corruption in the, with regards to the judiciary, that is with regards to cases that are lying low in the Federal High Court, in the Court of Appeal, including the Supreme Court itself. Well, the committee was set up into zones. We have Zone A, we have Zone B, and we have also Zone C. Zone A is principally covers Abuja, while Zone B covers the northern part of the country, and Zone C covers the southern part of the country. The members of the committee were distributed equally into the various zones, and they have been working, but the committee's work has been impeded to a very large extent by lack of funds. I think the judiciary has been complaining about lack of funds, and that has also been factored in by this committee. Well, I belong to Zone C of the committee, that is the southern part of the committee, and we're able to visit Lagos, went to the Federal High Courts, had a session with some of the judges that were handling financial and corruption matters. We also visited Port Harcourt and also had session with some of them in the Federal High Court as well as the Court of Appeal. Also in Lagos, we had session with justices of the Court of Appeal. We were able to find out their difficulties, especially at the Federal High Court level, in dealing speedily with some of these cases. And we had been able to address some of them by addressing the National Judicial Council as well as the Chief Justice himself. Although the committee was set up by the erstwhile Chief Justice of Nigeria, the present Chief Justice of Nigeria has endorsed it, and the committee has been working. But I must tell you that we have been able to find out certain problems from the prosecutorial aspect of it, from the judiciary itself, why some of these cases have been impeded from being heard as fast as one would have expected. First of all, from the prosecutorial aspect of it, we had been able to discover that the prosecution agencies do not truly have committed prosecutors. And they pay lip service, if I must say, to the prosecution of some of these cases. That is where we have an impediment there for the prosecution agencies. They were also able to identify their own challenges, why they have not been able to confront some of these cases frontally and effectively. And we all agree that there is a need for a synergy, especially between the committee and some of these prosecution agencies. Some will include training, some will include more responsibilities on the part of the government in order to enhance the efficacy of the prosecution system itself. And some of the judges too, like I said, we had been able to speak with them, and we know their problems, and it's not everything that will come out here and say. But in short, let me say that there is a need.
All right, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Usman Tetenge, let me even take you away from the committee now to ask, because we believe that the quality of any democracy, of course, depends on the extent to which the citizens attach greater importance. So if you look at the judiciary generally, would you say it is still the final arbiter of the common man? I mean, evaluating its performance in the outgone year.
To a very large extent, I will say so. I don't know whether we are talking about specific kind of cases, or we are talking about all kinds of cases that is before the judicial arm of government. But on the whole, I think the judiciary has been doing well. That is what I will say. I think within the limited resources that they have, the judiciary has been able to dispense with justice effectively, as far as I'm concerned. And like I said, there is a need for the government to increase the funding of the judiciary. I understand that there are limitations in funding everywhere, but I think judiciary is a very special species, and there is a need for the government to understand this and also help the judiciary in tackling some of the problems that is confronting the common man as well as democracy itself. So, but on the whole, I believe that the judiciary has fared well, and it can do more if the government is ready to give more funds, as well as the common man is ready to understand the limitations that the judiciary has in dispensing justice. Thank you.
Thank you. You've made a very important point there. But again, in your evaluation of performance, you said they're doing very well. Can we then narrow it to the specific cases, especially with cases involving very high-profile personalities? How would you assess performance?
From our own assessment, I think there has been an improvement, no doubt about that. There has been an improvement in justice delivery. When it comes to the high-profile cases you have mentioned, that is cases of corruption and financial crimes, there has been. As the Attorney General has said, I think I'll agree with him, that the enactment of that 2015 Administration of Justice Act has, to a very large extent, helped the judiciary, especially the Federal High Court, in dispensing justice effectively and perhaps speedily. That our committee has been able to confirm. So there's progress, I believe, but we can have more progress if, like I said earlier on, that the government as well as everyone is ready to give its own or contribute its own quota into ensuring that we fight this headlong, enemy of the people, that is corruption itself. Yes.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to you in the course of the program. But right now, I have a question for the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate. You know, one of the high points of 2019 was the P&ID case. You know, it sort of defined the judicial sector and raised questions on the style of the judiciary and what has been going on in Nigeria over the years before the P&ID case was discovered. What went down?
Well, the fee and ID case was not a Nigerian judiciary issue, so to say.
But we're deeply involved in it when it came out.
Yes, the Office of the Attorney General was involved, but I am trying to perhaps maybe clear the grounds. Okay. Because if you talk of Nigerian judicial system with particular reference to P&ID, perhaps a picture is being created as if the award or perhaps the judgment was a product of the Nigerian judicial system. It was not. That was what I was trying, in essence, to clarify. Okay. But then perhaps taking you down the history lane, if I may, P&ID was a gas processing agreement that was entered into between Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Nigeria, and indeed a foreign company registered in British Virgin Island by name P&ID. The intention was for the company to put in place a gas facility infrastructure and then be receiving gas from certain oil fields belonging to third parties, with particular reference to ADAX and the ExxonMobil, among others. But the issue is in line with the tradition. When an agreement is drafted involving a Nigerian state or an agency, ministry, department, or agency of government, the starting point is for the Office of the Attorney General to vet the agreement and ensure at the end of the day that the interest of the nation is adequately protected. A curious issue relating to P&ID, as at the time it was signed and executed by the Federal Ministry of Justice, committing the federal government of Nigeria, that agreement was never ever passed through the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation for vetting. And then two, it was supposed to be a tripartite agreement involving the oil and gas companies that were supposed to have provided the required gas, the P&ID that was supposed to have accepted the gas, process it, and indeed the Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources that was party to it. But unfortunately for that matter, the IOCs, oil producing companies that were supposed to have provided the gas demand of the P&ID was never a party to the agreement. So it was a case of as good as saying that I am negotiating an agreement on your behalf, or you are never a party to the agreement, and your consent, your input was never sought for. So one, the agreement was not subjected to the vetting by the Office of the Attorney General. Two, the companies that were to have provided the gas were equally not parties to the agreement, and eventually it became a bilateral agreement simply between P&ID and indeed the Ministry of Justice. Agreement fully and wholeheartedly drafted by the two without input from other ministries, departments, and agencies of government. So at the end of the day, the P&ID did not even acquire the land on which the plant ought to have been built. The land was not acquired from the state government, Cross Rivers, which was supposed to have provided the land. And then, further issue of interest was the fact that Department of Petroleum Resources, which was indeed a department of government that is responsible for approval of the design, the feasibility, and indeed the project, was equally not in any way accommodated as a party to the agreement. And above all, taking into consideration the financial threshold of the agreement, it was indeed an agreement that ought to have been passed by the Federal Executive Council. It was in no way taken to the Federal Executive Council for approval. And then it was within this context that eventually P&ID initiated an arbitral proceeding in London, claiming that there was indeed a breach on the part of the federal government and making a financial demand arising from the purported breach.
Okay.
And then eventually an award was made. All these things were issues that happened before the coming in place of this government. When an award was eventually made, no appeal was lodged by the previous government against the award, and then they opened up negotiations as against the idea of appealing or challenging the decision. So as at the time,
there was a negotiated amount, by the previous administration.
They were negotiating within the zone and region of $850 million payable to P&ID on account of purported breach.
Why did government not contest that before the arbitral judgment?
That was for the previous government that was in place when those things happened to answer. But I'm not in a position to answer that. But one thing I can tell you categorically, there was no appeal, and then negotiations were opened. Okay. As at the time, this government, under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, came in place, the time within which we were to appeal, the judgment had already elapsed.
Okay.
So that by implication means you cannot approach the court by way of an appeal as of right. You must have to seek leave for extension of time to appeal.
Which you did.
That exactly was what we eventually did. Yeah. And we did not only appeal eventually, but we equally filed an application seeking to stay the execution of the judgment, which amount had skyrocketed then to over $9 billion. So we eventually filed an application seeking leave to appeal against the judgment, and then two, stay the enforcement against the interests or assets of Nigerian government for the purpose of satisfying the $9 billion award. I'm happy to report that we have succeeded, one, in getting the desired leave to appeal. We have equally succeeded in getting an order for stay of execution of the enforcement proceedings pending the determination of an appeal. But that order was a conditional order that we were to pay into the court the sum of £250 million pending the determination of the appeal. But then we equally look at it and felt that losing the control of the amount by lodging same into the court could equally be an adverse decision against the interest of the government. So we now equally appeal against the order directing the deposit of such amount of money into the court, and we equally succeeded in getting a respite in the sense that we were to provide a bank guarantee as against the deposit of the cash. The success associated with the provision of the bank guarantee as against the payment of the cash is the fact that we remain in control of our funds and resources pending the determination of appeal.
Okay, Honorable Minister.
But the major perhaps issue of interest arising therefrom is the fact that we do not stop at appealing, neither do we stop at securing an order for state execution, but we have eventually taken into consideration the fraudulent undertones associated with the breaches, inherent compromises, inherent perhaps allegations of fraud, to now consider the possibility of seeking the setting aside of the entire award.
So we were able to establish a case of fraud and corruption.
Arising from the investigation that has been commissioned by the President, the agencies have worked extra hard and unravel the possibility, a clear, strong case of fraud associated with the execution of the agreement, and then we have now taken steps to file processes seeking the setting aside of the entire award, and this time around, not only appealing against the award, but having it set aside, and not only appealing against the enforcement of processes, but nullifying the contract, setting aside the entire award.
All right, we'll just take a break at this point and take a short break. When we come back, we will look at again the possibility of the set-aside that the Honourable Minister has talked about, and then other issues, and of course project into this new year what the future has for us in the justice sector. We'll be right back.
My name is Balaunti. I'm the Managing Director of Petroleum Product Marketing Company, a subsidiary of NNPC. There are significant price discrepancy between Nigeria and its neighbors across Africa. There's a discrepancy of between 150 to 250 naira. That creates an incentive for arbitrage, whereby smuggling triumphed by taking petroleum product across the neighbors so that they can be sold at higher price. While the smugglers are making the money, Nigeria is paying for it. And that payment is distorting everything that we do in terms of planning, in terms of our ability to fund, and thereby taking money that is meant for development. The introduction of this Operation White will have a reduction of close to 6 million liters on a daily basis, which if you take an average of 150, translate to a saving of over 1 billion naira every day. That is the benefit of Operation White, and we have started seeing the great benefit.
You people sell imported materials here. As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, and of course, Jume was caught unawares there. Yes. So let's.
I was going through the tweets and just seeing what Nigerians are, their contributions to the. But we'll get back to that. Okay. You have a question there.
All right. Just before we went on break, we're talking about the issue of the PNID issue. And the minister, of course, told us that we have been able to secure, judgments that would probably enable us to set aside the arbitral award in the UK. But there are questions, there are issues that have arisen from this, whether it will not raise a jurisdictional question, and whether the decision we get here, or the judgment we given here in the country, has extraterritorial value.
I must say, first and foremost, that the Honorable Attorney General rose to the occasion in challenging the PI and D case, because that was an international conspiracy against Nigeria, but with the collusion of some highly placed Nigerians. But the government has taken the right steps. There's no doubt about that. And one of the steps being taken is to make sure that the fraudulent elements in the transaction are clearly identified, not only identified, but judicially acknowledged. That is being done. Internationally, the founder of that company, the chief perpetrator of that fraud, is known to be an international scammer and fraudster. But they saw some gaps in our own system, and then they keyed in under the previous administration And now the present government has to clear that mess. So I think right steps have been taken. We continue to monitor and observe what is going on. But there's no doubt that when judgments are pronounced in Nigeria, which clearly underscore the fraudulent elements, those judgments will be relevant when eventually we go back to the court in overseas. Yes.
And based on the PNID case, President Buhari has continually called for urgent judicial reform, seeking efficient special crimes court to handle cases like this, like the PNID. So in order to remove bottlenecks from the judiciary, at what stage are we? Are we moving forward towards that? Can we be able to handle cases like this back home and ensure that justice is delivered? If Nigeria is cheated out of her money, because that's a lot of money there.
You see, I'm glad you have raised this question.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you are discussing justice sector.
Yes.
We have not given enough attention as a country to the justice sector over the years. I'm not talking about this administration. In fact, this administration has done more than most of the previous government in regard to the respect, and creating an efficient and functional judiciary. I'll give you an illustration. The judiciary is not an appendage of the executive. Judiciary is a separate arm of government. But we have always treated the judiciary as if they are part of the executive. That has to stop. In fact, the lessons we should learn from the PI and this case is that we cannot afford to toy with issues of administration of justice. Those who who handle government cases, they must be on top of the cases. Those who negotiate on behalf of the government, they must be on top of their cases. And then we need to strengthen the judiciary. We need to strengthen the administration of justice. Because, it is the face of our democracy. The judiciary is the face of our democracy. It is the face of the rule of law. If that segment is ugly, it makes our democracy to appear as if, we are not sincere, we are not serious. So I think we need to do more. The government has taken some actions aimed at enhancing the position of the judiciary, but much more has to be done. For example, you talked about special courts. I don't believe in special courts.
Okay.
I've always expressed this position. Okay. The reason I don't believe in special courts is that you're not going to bring special prosecutors, you're not going to bring special investigators, you're not going to create special witnesses. It's the same Nigerians who will man the court. Why don't we use the opportunity, rather than talking about special courts, which reminds us of military tribunals? Okay. Why don't we use the opportunity to do more for the judiciary? The Attorney General talked about constitutional amendment. Why don't we tinker with the Constitution to reduce the workload of the Supreme Court? To determine what cases will go to the Supreme Court, what cases will stop at the Court of Appeal. We can do that. So that
will that in any way, reduce the bottlenecks in the judiciary?
Absolutely. The just point it will reduce. Cases of he said 1 billion. In fact, 1 million naira cases sometimes can end in the Supreme Court, wasting the precious time of the eminent justices. Okay. So we need to tinker with the provisions of the Constitution to reconfigure. People are talking about restructuring. For me, I think that's where the restructuring has to start.
From the judiciary?
Oh yes, we need to look at our judicial setup.
Okay, let's put you on hold and go over to Jos, where we have Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Usman Tetenge. Earlier on in our conversation, we did mention that, of course, the reforms have commenced, of course, in both the judiciary and in our judicial system, which led to, of course, the sanctioning of some, high-placed judges. Now, in the 2019 and 2020 Supreme Court legal year, the Nigerian Bar Association members raised issues of what they call intrusion in, and I just like to read it out, intrusion and interference in the disciplinary process of the judiciary in what it says is a manner that undermines its independence and rule of law. What do you have to say to that as a member of the bar?
Well, my association has already spoken, and I entirely agree with it. I think what the Nigerian Bar Association is trying to make people understand, including the executive arm of government, is that for disciplinary measures against judicial officers, there are constitutional provisions which have been already provided for, and that is the National Judicial Council. I think this has already received judicial approval, and it has been applied in some of these cases where some of these judicial offices have been arraigned and tried for one reason or the other. I completely agree with them that if a constitution provides for a particular way in which a judicial officer can be disciplined, there is a need to allow the judicial process to take its course. Allow them to go through that process before you take them to court. As I have already said, this has received judicial approval, and I believe the executive arm is also aware of this. That is not to say that we are making any excuses for any judicial officers whose conduct is inimical to the Constitution itself or to the performance of his own functions as a judicial officer. Wherever you are found not performing your judicial functions in accordance with your oath of office, then definitely the law will take its course against you. So I believe and I agree entirely with the opinion expressed by the Nigerian Bar Association that let us all allow the Constitution to have supremacy over everything we do and over all our actions and inactions. I think that is my opinion here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll just, before we bring in the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, we've got some tweets. We'll quickly take them. We'll just have less than 10 minutes to wind up. All right, this one is coming from Titus Monday Knock, and he says, I would like to see a judiciary that is firm in decisions, thoroughly independent, and dispense justice with speed and sincerity. Not a judiciary that passes high sentences on petty criminals and passes lower or no jail terms to corrupt political office holders.
And Chris Simon tweets, judiciary as the last hope of a common man must be determined to be independent, fair, and transparent in carrying out their responsibilities.
Dele Jack Solomon tweets, while it will clearly be an exaggeration to accuse all judges in Nigeria of corruption, it is reasonable to conclude that corruption, potential inequality, and endless delays in the judicial process remains a problem to be nipped in the bud in 2020. This the judiciary must not fail to do.
And Law Alpha C tweets, the justice sector in 2020 will be critical towards the realization of corrupt-free Nigeria, as it will try corrupt individuals and they are expected to shun compromise.
Ibrahim Modu Aji, going forward, we want to see a corrupt-free judiciary where integrity is upheld. The judiciary needs to restore their dignity and respect from the public eyes by sanitizing themselves. Let us have a judiciary arm of government that will work for the poor, not only for the rich.
And Mike Ayako tweets, judiciary, they say, is the last hope of a common man. The statement was extensively diminished in our judicial system until government took a bold step to sanitize it. But a lot still has to be done. Like Caesar's wife, the judicial officers must live above board. The judiciary must be independent from other organs of government.
All right, and Lawal Ibrahim Olamilekon tweets, this is a new year. We don't need to talk much about the past so that we can concentrate on the present for a better future. So a justice sector needs to work according to the rule of law. Simple.
And Josh PhD tweets, happy 2020 Nigerians. The justice sector should be active and fight for Nigerians against political hijackers.
And
we have
this last one,
John, yes.
Yes, Abuja John. Judiciary should put God first in all they do, since everyone depends on them. God bless Nigeria. And those are the tweets coming in. Basically, Honorable Minister, you heard the position of Senior Advocate Tetenge in Jos about, the interference, alleged interference.
Well, I don't think, in all sincerity, that the executive is interfering in the independence of the judiciary. Rather than interfering, what has manifested arising from the conduct of the executive, taking into consideration the fourth alteration as it relates to the autonomy of the judiciary, taking into consideration the support, both in terms of funding, increased funding by the executive to the judiciary, is indeed a proof and establishes a fact that the government is more or less supportive of the judiciary as against interfering. That fact can further be established taking into consideration the decisions over time and of recent, both political and otherwise, that have been handed over by down by the judiciary relating to the cases in respect of which the government is partially involved. Take, for example, what obtains by way of a decision of an election petition matter in Zamfara, for example, at a time when the APC, when the government, being an APC government, is in power, and a decision of that magnitude was eventually handed down by the judiciary, is a clear proof, clear establishment of non-interference, because that couldn't have happened.
In less than 30 seconds, what inspired the release of Showore and Dasuki?
Well, nothing.
No external pressure?
Well, external pressure, even if there exists one, does not in any way and by any imagination play a role in the decision of the government. But then the determination to establish a rule of law, to establish magnanimity, even when you have rights, privileges, to appeal against the ruling or decision, even when you have rights and privileges to seek for review of the orders, even when you have rights and privileges to appeal and apply for stay of execution, were indeed the major factors that played a role in the spirit of national, perhaps maybe extension of national magnanimity and compassion at a time when it matters most.
Yes. Thank you so much, very much, Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. It's been a pleasure having your in-depth analysis of issues in the judiciary. Thank you so much for coming. And Professor Yemi Akinsheyi George, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, President Center for Social Legal Studies. Thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. It's been a pleasure having you. And from our Just Network Center, we have Garba Usman Titengi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He was the former Vice President, Nigerian Bar Association between 2000 and 2002. He was also a former member of the National Judicial Council, NJC, between 2014 and 2018. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Sports Update is next.